Good afternoon and welcome to the show. During today's show, we will discuss critical issues facing government and industry leaders around teleworking and continuity of operations planning. With me today on the show are Sharon Wall, the Regional Commissioner for the Federal Acquisition Service at GSA and the GSA Telework Program Management Office Director, Jack Penkoske, the Director of Manpower, Personnel and Security at DISA, Vaughn Noga, the Chief Technology Officer at EPA, Bryan Pagliano, the Special Advisor, Bureau of Information Resource Management, Department of State, Paul Cantwell, Vice President, Public Sector, Lifesize Communications, and Nik Rouda, the Director of Solutions and Verticals at Riverbed. Let's get in and start talking about, let's first sort of like level set the audience by talking about your involvement in telework programs. Let's start with Sharon Wall-GSA. Sharon, can you tell us a little bit about your involvement with telework at GSA?
Absolutely, Jim. Well, in January of this year, I was named the Program Management Officer for telework at GSA. And I was named by Martha Johnson, the administrator. As the signing of the Telework Enhancement Act of 2010, GSA has a major role to play in telework, both as it relates to advancing it within our own agency, as well as assisting other federal agencies with their telework programs. And so we kicked off our initiative, which we're really calling Telework 2.0, because GSA has a history of excellence in telework, which dates back in some cases to 1998 and 1999.
Wow.
So we had our kickoff meeting in January, bringing in leaders, young leaders from across GSA in a kind of an innovative developing leaders initiative. We brought them in from our Advanced Leadership Development Program and figured we'd get some return on our investment.
Sure.
And they are leading initiatives that relate to technology, policy, customer experience, skills enhancement, measurement, and so the foundational issues that really help to break down the barriers and to really reboot and to bring Telework 2.0 to GSA.
Terrific. We'll be drilling down on some of those issues, but it sounds great. It's exciting to see telework getting a lot more priority attention than it has over the years. Jack Penkoske, welcome back to the show. Jack, could you tell us a little bit about your role at DISA as it relates to telework?
Yeah, Jim, it's great to be back. As you know, at DISA, we've been at telework now for several years. Our organization has been responsible for putting the program together. When we first started several years ago, we allowed our employees to telework 1 day every 2 weeks. Our program has grown now to where our employees can actually telework up to 3 days per week.
Wow.
We also pay for half of the cost of the broadband into their house. Have a lot of other initiatives. So in DISA, the telework initiative, I think, has really gotten inculcated into the culture. Right now, over 60% of our employees telework in one way, shape, or form. So that represents about 4,000 of our 6,000 civilians. So we'll talk more about it, in the other portions, but it's a big part of our human capital strategy, and it's in our culture right now.
Yeah, it's exciting to see the progress being made. I mean, I remember shows in the past we'd say so intuitively obvious that there are benefits, but yet why aren't we taking advantage of them? But it seems like we're coming along. Paul Cantwell over at Lifesize, how's a company like Lifesize positioned here, and what's your role in telework there, Paul?
Well, Lifesize is all about providing high-definition video conferencing products to the government, and one of the things about the teleworker is that they have to stay and remain connected to their other constituencies throughout the government, whether it's locally or geographically. It doesn't really matter. Anywhere in the world, we can help those folks get connected. So we manufacture the products and provide the tools that allow people to not only communicate over video and let them to maintain that connection to their agency, as well as to record and stream and provide those kinds of tools that that will make that government employee that much more productive.
Yeah, I know. A lot of those tools that we've been struggling with over the years, all of a sudden are now priorities for getting a lot of this stuff done. Vaughn Noga over EPA, can you tell us a little bit your role of CTO over there? Can you tell us a little bit of your involvement with the telework issues?
Okay, thanks for having me back.
Sure.
I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak about this. The EPA, my primary role is to help people identify the needs for the workforce, work with the administration, identify their needs to meet their goals, and then after that, shape solutions. Shape those solutions that meet not only the needs of the average or the regular teleworker, but also look at what is our response force needs as far as teleworking mobility requirements. And then after that, we take care of those solutions. We provide all the maintenance and support for those as they're deployed into the field.
Yeah, terrific, great. We'll drill down on some of those solutions as the show goes on, talk a little bit about the technologies and so forth that are being used here. Nik Rouda over at Riverbed, can you tell us a little bit about your role with teleworking and Riverbed, how you're positioning the company to support the government in these areas?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me on the program.
Sure.
Riverbed is really about IT performance. Our goal is to help companies and government organizations in the USA and operations worldwide maintain the best possible performance for their workers wherever they are. So we're really all about overcoming the boundaries of distance. It was joked earlier on that you can buy bandwidth, but you can't overcome latency. And as you think about telework, you have people working on a wide range of types of networks, whether it's home broadband, they're on 3G cards, maybe they're even over at Starbucks on the Wi-Fi there. And how do they maintain productivity and get access to collaborating with all their other fellow workers, regardless of their location? That's really what Riverbed's all about, is solving that performance challenge.
Yeah, terrific, great. We'll hear more about it as we move along. Bryan Pagliano, advisor at the Department of State. I guess when I think about State Department, by definition, you think about a lot of long-distance overseas communications kinds of things, and where tools such as video conferencing and things are probably been around for a long, long time. But tell us now how you're moving into the world of telework and perhaps your role in the telework issues.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
Sure.
My role is also from a technology standpoint. I work in the Information Resource Management Bureau, and we are responsible there for building the systems that support the telework programs. And yeah, we do have a lot of challenges in terms of worldwide access to them and latency, and
Right.
There's a lot of interest in the program, and we've been able to extend it to multiple areas of the world. And that's something we're proud of.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, anxious to hear more about that too. Let's start talking a little bit about programs themselves and some of the benefits associated with the programs. We said the program is about telework, but also continuity of operation. So when you think of benefits, there's that benefit also that obviously comes along with it. But let's talk about some of the major benefits you're seeing with implementing telework. Let's start this time with Vaughn Noga over EPA. Vaughn, what are some of the benefits you see accruing by going to teleworking?
I think you have to look at the benefits across three areas: social benefits, economic benefits, and certainly the environmental benefits of teleworking. From a social perspective, we're creating a happy workforce, right? People are going to be able to, instead of commuting 2 hours a day, for some of us, each way, they're going to be able to work where they live. That's certainly an advantage there. Economic, I think we can draw, especially when you tie in COOP and some of the dollars that are expended on COOP facilities. COOP becomes virtual COOP. You work where you sleep, in some respects. And then environmental, we're taking cars off the road. We're reducing emissions by promoting mobility and telework.
Yeah. I would guess from EPA, that's a good thing too, from in the mission of the EPA. Bryan, what are some of the benefits you're seeing coming out from telework programs?
So our initial system that we developed, which we call OpenNet Everywhere, was developed for the telework program.
Okay.
And since its development, and it was initially targeted for that, we've had a lot of our foreign service officers make their Washington rotations and say, hey, this is great technology. We want to be able to use this in our embassies for our diplomatic missions. And what we've seen new and innovative ways for our diplomats around the world to be able to use these technologies. That wasn't necessarily envisioned on the first iteration, since it was targeted for a domestic telework program. And scenarios like duty officer scenarios, being able to have their embassy staff have 24/7 responsiveness without necessarily have to be at the embassy. You know, a lot of ways that they've found to use the tool that not necessarily were part of the original design.
Right. Yeah, terrific. And I relate back to Vaughn's comment about the time in cars with just being wasted time, you know, and especially with dangers with texting and things like that. You much prefer somebody to be in a stable environment to be doing their work. Sharon Wall, what are some of the major benefits you're seeing as you're rolling out these telework programs?
Well, I think that clearly the continuity of operations component is huge. As we've seen last year here in the Washington, D.C. area, though many of the agencies had significant issue with ability to continue operations, 80% of GSA was able to continue to work through those snow events, through the technology that had been deployed with the laptops, Blackberries, and soft phone technologies through voice over IP, and essentially with my leading the program management office remotely from Boston and having access to expertise across the nation, being able to tap into a virtual team that is not physically co-located has been tremendous. The other piece of this is it enables customer intimacy and allows us to be able to service our customers far better. As an example, we highlighted during the recent Telework Week, which was February 14th through the 18th. Stories that relate to the way that we are able to service our customers. And we have deployed in Afghanistan one of our GSA Federal Acquisition employees to be very close to his Department of Defense customer. Wow. And working on contracts to locally source supplies for the Department of Defense to essentially build better relationships with the Afghan people, but being able to link back through the tools that we've provided to home base here in the United States, continuing to do his job in an excellent fashion while supporting and being very close to the customer. Another example of it is, as we talk about the work-life balance, is that, in terms of we had an employee with a need for medical accommodation who was a very productive employee. What we see is a reduction in the amount of sick leave used and people able to continue to make a contribution because clearly it's about servicing customers, it's about mission, and it's about being responsive to the taxpayer. We had an individual who was awaiting a lung transplant.
Wow.
And working while receiving chemo in a facility that had wireless, able to continue to work remotely when she was able to work, and then being able to have that leave when the lung transplant actually is going to happen.
Wow, that's great. There are things, I'm glad you're bringing them up because I think they're not, people don't see these things, and the sick leave issue, I guess, someone who doesn't feel well, you don't want them in the office getting everybody else sick, but they can certainly be productive working from their telework station at home. Another interesting twist. Jack Penkoske over at DISA, what are some of the biggest benefits you're seeing accrue over at DISA?
Yeah, I think there's dozens of benefits, but the two I would point out today would be how it helps recruitment and retention, for one. We have employees all the time that tell us that they come to DISA or they stay at DISA because, of the opportunity to telework. And so it's a huge recruitment and retention tool. And, I read a study not too long ago that on turnover that if, it can cost up to $50,000 to replace an employee. So there's a business case there that you want to keep your people. The other part of that, as we talked about, when we were here before, we're moving 4,300 people from Northern Virginia to Fort Meade. Yes, and many of them, their commute is doubling or tripling. So having the opportunity to telework 1, 2, or 3 days a week is allowing many of them to stay with us. And the other one that I think is huge, and a lot of times doesn't get foot stomped enough, is productivity. In almost every case, I think, if there's good performance standards, you can make the argument that, teleworking employees are at least as productive and in many, many cases more productive than they are in the traditional, work environment. If you can make that business case, even naysayers, have a hard time arguing something like that.
Yeah, and I think you're right. That's that trust issue, and what you've heard me say before, if you want trustworthy employees, first thing you have to do is trust them. But I know, even myself, I feel like if I have a day where I don't have to drive places and go to meetings, I can just sit in front of my computer. I can get a lot of things. I can script a lot of radio shows, and I can, knock off a lot of emails. I feel I'm much more productive when I'm able to just, sit in front of my home computer and work.
Many of our employees say they work longer hours when they telework.
I believe that.
Because they're not worried about, getting on the bus or getting in the car and all those kind of things.
Right. Yeah, terrific. Thanks. Let's hear from our industry folks on this. Let's go to Nik Rouda from Riverbend. Nik, what are some of the benefits that you're seeing your government customers accruing by going to telework programs?
I fully agree with a lot of the benefits that have already been called out. I think maybe a way of thinking about them in an analogy is mind, body, and soul. So from a mind point of view, there's a lot of direct benefits in terms of cost savings, in terms of having better COOP plans, built-in capabilities there. There's a lot of smart reasons why teleworking makes sense. If you think about body, it's about where do people need to be, where do they have to be, as well as where do they want to be. And as we said, they can be more productive in other locations. Sometimes their jobs takes them other locations. They have duty stations around the world. Wherever they need to physically be, how do we keep them productive and capable in their jobs? And then soul is back to the point about recruiting. How do you attract the next generation of workers? How do you get the smart people to work in government? And you need to be able to find a way that appeals to them and keeps them engaged, gets them able to use their creative energies. And oftentimes that's not the office environment. It can be a wide range of environments that stir different ideas. And with Riverbed, being able to give people the performance so that you overcome the bounds of distance. It really doesn't matter where people are.
Right.
This also ties into other initiatives like federal data center consolidation or cloud first, where we're really trying to get away from a attachment to a physical location and serve people wherever they are. And that then flows right on back to the citizens.
Yeah, terrific. I like that. Mind, body, and soul. Sounds like a tagline somewhere for a good telework commercial. But hey, Paul Cantwell at Lifesize. Paul, what's some of the benefits you're seeing be accrued as people move, other than the fact that your technologies are all of a sudden hot property these days?
Well, yeah, I mean, our technologies is all about enabling a lot of these activities to happen. You know, this panel mentioned a lot of things, and I would categorize them as kind of work-life balance. You've got somebody, we're getting people off the beltway, we're getting people much more productive, their quality of life, people are just feeling better about themselves. But the other thing is, we're also seeing with video, particularly with the severe reduction in travel budgets that a lot of the federal agencies are faced with, we've got to be able to provide those employees with those tools to still get their jobs done, and yet keeping these people off of airplanes and out of cars and becoming much more productive. And video is a very powerful tool that allows them to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think you're exactly right there. It's budgets are going to be tight. Let's face it. There's next couple years, we're going to be in a very austere budget climate. So things like this that make sense as ways to save money but still maintain capabilities and get the job done are going to become very important. I want to talk about technologies and constraints around teleworking and COOP. But before we do that, we need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Sharon Wall from GSA, Jack Penkoske from DISA, Vaughn Noga from EPA, Bryan Pagliano from the Department of State, Paul Cantwell from Lifesize Communications, and Nik Rouda from Riverbed. We're talking telework and COOP. And before coming out of break, we want to talk a little bit about some of the key technologies that are being used to get a sense. Let's start with Jack Penkoske over DISA. DISA is kind of known as being sort of in the forefront with technology. What are some of the technologies you're employing to get teleworking rolling?
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, I think we've got it rolling, right now. But one of the big concerns, from managers in the past has been the ability to meet, have meetings and that. So I think, having the technology in place to do that, whether it's the VTC, exactly, the teleconferences, we have a defense collaboration online that, that can be used. So we can even have all hands with, 6,000 people worldwide, and they can all be connected, on that. So, having those in place, and making sure that everybody is leveraging them, I think, has been key. The other thing that we've tried to work hard on is, if we have a particular niche or something that is causing a problem and moving our telework to the next step, look at that. And one of the big ones for us was, individuals that have to telework in a classified environment, have to have access to a classified network. So we're pretty pleased, and it actually took about 2 to 3 years to crack the nut. But in January, we opened the first classified telework center, which we think is the first one in the federal government. And the employees have to, the criteria is they have to, need access to the SuperNet on a regular basis. But we have never seen technology as a constraint. It is an enabler, and sometimes people try to use it as an excuse to do teleworking. But we think we have the tools in place, and then the strategy is look at the other niches for smaller portions of the workforce, like the classified telework center that we have to implement.
Yeah, good. And we're going to talk about constraints too a little bit later on. But it's right. I used to tell folks there are no constraints, just challenges. Figure out a way to get it done. Sharon, how about some of the things that you're seeing as key technologies that have really helped the programs move quicker?
Well, we really embarked on an aggressive training schedule as it relates to the technologies that we're using at GSA to make sure that all of the tools that are available, that everybody fully understands them, because we say that telework is a team sport. It's about improving performance. It's about contracting with your team and ensuring that you're meeting your obligations. It's all about the improved performance. So what we've been working with our OCIO, and we have same time meeting. We have instant messaging that people log on to so that you know that people are available to you to be able to quickly get to. We're using the desktop video through voice over IP and virtual private network as well as Citrix. And so making sure that everybody is conversant in all of the tools. During Telework Week, 25% of GSA nationwide was teleworking, and we used it as a stress test to essentially determine how all of the tools would work, how the help desk, the entire organization infrastructure, we stress tested it, and then we would do a hot wash each night to talk about how the network held up, what issues the help desk saw, and continuously fed into our processes the feedback that we got from the help desk. Was there a training issue? Was there a network issue? Were people comfortable with the tools? And of course, we were a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of we are getting ready to roll out a whole new collaborative suite of technology tools, in that we're going to be moving to the cloud in terms of some technology leadership, and we're going to be utilizing the Google platform. So that will enable us to do some additional training and provide a real collaborative platform. And what we found was that our employees felt that, 76% of those surveyed felt that they were more productive being able to use the instant messaging, use the same time meeting, having virtual meetings, using the desktop video. And so essentially they were able to stay connected, and we learned so much from it, and it gave us the opportunity to really flex our telework muscle.
Wow, very good. Similar to what Jack said about being able to have an all-hands thing and stress test things and so forth. I'll tell you, we're really moving to a time where, with the bandwidth proliferating the way it is in the wireless world and everything else, we'll be working, who knows where we'll be. For example, I don't know where I work. I work wherever I happen to be. There's always a device that I can get to whatever I need to get to. And we're quickly approaching a world where time will equal zero. You'll be able to be anywhere you want in an instant, either virtually or physically. Bryan, what do you think are some of the key technologies driving all this?
Well, like you said, there's no shortage of remote access mobile options out in industry at this point. So the future is not necessarily going to be one thing. The key from a technology perspective is to be able to combine all these tools in a way that replicates the in-the-office experience wherever you happen to be. You know, and I think a lot of that's going to be convenience. And from the user perspective, is convenience these days is found from the retail device that you happen to purchase. That's smartphones, tablets. For me, maybe it's a netbook. For somebody else, maybe it's a desktop computer or something like that. And our challenge is going to be able to look at all these platforms and then deliver the enterprise data, voice, video, whatever solution is going to make you most productive outside of the office to you in a secure fashion.
Yeah, it's fun. It's interesting watching the discussions over which products to use. Well, it used to be we'd argue about which word processing package was the best. Now we argue about iPhone, Android, BlackBerry, iPad. It's interesting. I guess it's sometimes I think whatever you get comfortable with is what becomes your default favorite. Vaughn, what do you think in terms of some of the key technologies that are the real drivers here?
Yeah, I agree with Bryan. I think when you look at the technology space, it's not that we're void of technologies. I think the issue is the application of these technologies. And I agree, one of the things that we're driving is work at home like you work at work. And some of the biggest challenges we face are the softer side of supporting those users. It's not, does a token work to get access to the agency? It's I've only used this once in the last 6 months. I forgot how to use it. Right. It's being able to support that workstation wherever it sits. So it's the technologies that support the remote support help desk. It's being able to patch machines wherever they sit. I mean, we still have a requirement to take care of those government machines, regardless of what facility or what home they sit in. Right. So the focus for us is really the foundation. What are the foundational technologies that need to be deployed across the workforce, regardless of whether they're in the office or at home, so we can start enabling mobility for new employees or for current employees to expand that. So, really, a push for us is the seamless application of technologies. Yeah. And it's one of the largest areas that we struggle with. I met with a room full of IT and agency stakeholders 2 weeks ago, and the issues we came up with were not technology based. Oh, I bet. They were application of technologies. They were the softer side of mobility and driving telework. Right. Yeah. We'll talk about constraints here in just a couple minutes. Paul, being a provider. What are some of the big technologies that you see as sort of the leaders here that are helping things move quickly?
So first off, I'd like to say that every single government customer we talk to, they all have very similar issues, and that is whatever technology they use, it's got to be easy to deploy, easy to maintain, and easy to use, and yet still be flexible enough to allow them to accommodate whatever mission they're fulfilling. And video is actually becoming a very powerful tool, not only from an ability for somebody to meet face-to-face, but also to be able to record events or activities for, as was mentioned earlier, an agency-wide communication or an agency-wide state of the agency where government agencies can not only have a video conference agency-wide, but can record it and allow it to be played back for people who are not available. And you also use it as a tool to deliver service to the citizens. So, one of the things that we're seeing is that video in and of itself is creating other opportunities for the government to be able to deliver solutions out to their constituents, whether it's within the agency or out to the citizens themselves. Yeah,
I think the combination of the technologies and the proliferation of the bandwidth, I think there's things we haven't even thought of yet that are going to be happening in the not too distant future that are going to make big differences in the way we work and play and live our lives. Nik Rouda over at Riverbed, what are some of the big technology drivers you're seeing as key enablers to making all this stuff move rapidly forward?
Well, I think Vaughn was right when he said that Bryan was right. The technologies are out there. Thank you.
One disadvantage of being the last to talk on a different question is you could sort of just say ditto, but give us some of your own thoughts on it.
From my point of view, the question isn't the how. The technologies for people to work and be productive and get their jobs done exist. Email's there, file sharing, cloud technologies are emerging. There's video, there's voice over IP, there's desktop virtualization. All these technologies are out there. So if the question isn't really how do I do this, maybe the question should be how fast is it? How do we deliver the same performance for people when they're not in the office? Right. And performance really is critical to people being productive. If things are too slow, they're going to get discouraged, they're going to get distracted, they're not going to find the same results they would have. And so if you want to enable teleworking, I think technologies such as those, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some of Riverbed, WAN optimization, speeding up the network. We talked about bandwidth becoming less expensive, but sometimes it's not just bandwidth. Distance is really a key, and location is a key factor in telework. I flew in last night from San Francisco, and as I was coming down the Dulles Toll Road and then around the Beltway, at 1 a.m., I was startled. There was no bandwidth issue. Those freeways, 4 or 5 lanes wide, I was the only car on the road. So that's sort of what Riverbed does, is it takes a lot of the redundant traffic off the road, opens up your network connections, and if you think about it, really the network is the enabling technology underlying the delivery of all these pieces. And if you can make the space on that network, it's not about buying more bandwidth. That gets expensive, especially as you start supporting thousands of employees, tens of thousands of employees, et cetera. If you can make it run faster, and then take away the speed limits. Don't be limited by any sort of capacity. Be able to get more, even above what is rated, and our technology and WAN optimization at Riverbed does that as well. And then a third piece is if you do run into congestion, as these new technologies do put more load on the network, more traffic on the freeways out there, how do you prioritize? How do you make sure that the real-time applications like voice and video run in real time so that people aren't delayed, and then background activities like printing documents or downloading files can pass through as they need to. So being able to make more space on your network, being able to go as fast as you want on your network, and being able to prioritize are all things Riverbed does that help companies and government organizations worldwide work wherever they want to work.
So you're optimizing the bandwidth and to make sure that things work efficiently without having to throw money at it or constantly add more and more bandwidth to the equation. All right, let's talk about the things that are tough. The hard parts, the constraints, the things that still, you occasionally pick up the trade journals or you pick up a government magazine locally and you'll hear about somebody's concerned about the employees teleworking and so forth. You still have a little bit of that culture issue bouncing around. But what are some of the things that are really the tough things that are constraints? What are things you still need to sort of overcome every day in order to get where you want to go? Let's start with Bryan this time at State Department. Bryan, what's some of the constraints you face day to day?
So, as 2010 approached, our existing remote access system, and not to use an industry term, was getting a little long in the tooth. And recognizing this, our CIO, Susan Swart, decided to dedicate reinvestment, ARA, stimulus funds in developing a new system. So we went out and surveyed the department, tried to do needs analysis, gathered up the wants that people had who were existing teleworkers, who were using it as remote access, who wanted to become remote access users, and then designed the system around that. And at this point, we're getting ready to, it's in pilot mode at this point, launch our next generation system, Global OpenNet, which is going to be, easier to adapt to applications, be able to be applied to more devices, be able to be more flexible to present a better desktop experience for our users, such that it's easier for them to telework.
Right, so you're getting the optimal technologies in place and the optimal solutions in place in order to make it all work seamlessly and better experience for all. Sharon, what do you think? What are some of the tough issues yet? Do you still run into that culture issue from time to time? You know, the manager that just wants that employee to be there in the room, and
Absolutely, Jim. The issue there is that telework, mobile work doesn't create performance issues. It just reveals them, and telework is just work. It's enabling the opportunities for people to do their work and to be much more flexible and ensure all of the benefits that we've talked about. So there are cultural issues in terms of looking at the demographics of the workforce. You've got 5 generations of people in the workforce. And if you look at it from the standpoint of the Generation Y, they're able to be much more productive in a mobile environment. They're used to the technology and the tools. This is nothing new to them.
Right.
And in order to attract the best and the brightest, we really need to be able to offer this to them and to allow them to be innovative and productive, as we have seen in this virtual PMO team. But it's basically creating those measures, creating a contract with the team, the individual workers. It's about flattening the organization, because that relationship when you're teleworking is not just between manager and employee. It's really between the people who are part of their work team, contracting, and holding each other accountable to the overall performance that they're contracting to deliver to the government. And it's about creating a government that really works. So the cultural piece of it is big. We look upon this as a huge transformational opportunity, looking at it from the sustainability perspective and the benefits to the environment, looking at it from a performance perspective and how by driving this and looking at it from the whole notion of sustainable workplace. So, we look at these 3 huge components and everything converging, because as we enable our mobile workforce, we have people that are out working and in alternate work sites, not generating GHG, and we have the opportunity to reduce our physical space, which here in the Washington area, the 18th and F location is going to basically converge 3 leased locations into 1 physical space.
Wow.
So we're going to be able to help agencies do that. But a big barrier is changing that mindset, changing that I have to manage you by presence. Well, you're sitting in the office. How do I know how productive you are? And it's interesting, because when you get into meetings with the unions, because this is a condition, a working condition, they will say, why is it that, I have to give you something different if I am working in another location where I have all of my productivity tools, as opposed to sitting here in the office? Isn't it my job? Isn't it just work? So we're really focused on measurement and being able to have those metrics that demonstrate the benefit of technology, of telework. And so the barrier that we see is cultural and managing that performance, because we also think that you can't say to to an individual whose performance is maybe not where it needs to be, oh, you can't telework. Well, are we going to have detention where managers are going to be expected to sit in the office and manage employees whose performance is substandard?
Yeah, right.
Or are we going to address the performance issue and really create an organization of people who are able to perform anywhere?
Yeah, that's excellent. And I think it's important too what you brought up about measuring performance and all. I know, for example, if an employee has a job and they need to produce a report every week, do you really care where they are as long as they're producing the report every week and getting it done accurately and on time and correctly? I mean, it should be irrelevant as to where the location is. I want to hear from our other panelist on this same issue, but before we do that, we need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Sharon Wall from GSA, Jack Penkoske from DISA, Vaughn Noga from EPA, Bryan Pagliano from the Department of State, Paul Cantwell from Lifesize Communications, and Nik Rouda from Riverbed. We're talking telework and COOP and benefits and constraints. When we went to break, we were talking, we heard from a couple of our panelists about some of the still difficult issues to overcome to get where you want to go. I'd like to hear from our other panelists. Let's start with you, Jack. What, Penkoske-DISA, what are some of the constraints or the things yet that are difficult that you have to continue to, stay on top of to keep your program moving forward?
Yeah, even though more than 60% of our agency employees are teleworking now, we have pockets of resistance to that. So a big way that we try to address that is through a comprehensive training and education program for both managers and supervisors, so they understand what it is. Because I think sometimes supervisors feel threatened by it. You know, they feel that, you know, if they don't have that view of the employee, that, you know, maybe their performance will be in jeopardy, so they want that control. So an interesting dynamic with that sometimes is, you know, making sure that we get supervisors to telework, because once they get an opportunity to do that, they see how good it is, and it isn't, you know, that horrible thing that they envision,
right.
And then they embrace it more in their organization. So doing that, the other thing that you have to watch with telework is, you know, there are still, you know, positions that require face-to-face with the customers.
Right.
So you have to plan it out smartly and make sure that, you know, you still have that coverage, you know, for customers that are coming into an organization, so that, you know, you can't have 6,000 people, you know, maybe teleworking
right.
all on the same day. So planning it out smartly that way. So I think that education program for both the managers and supervisors is extremely important. And then the other thing is that, you know, and, you know, it's very near and dear to the heart of DISA, we want to make sure that we continue to push telework, you know, forward for the future, but we have to make sure that we never compromise the networks. Yeah. So the protection of the networks, you know, is something that, you know, is first and foremost. Don't compromise that, and then, you know, after you get that taken care of, then make sure, you know, you just move full speed ahead with, you know, putting it in place.
Of course, and, you know, we, in fact, I believe you've been on some of our shows on security, because we could talk for hours on that subject alone. But let's go over to EPA and talk to Vaughn. Vaughn, what do you think, from your perspective, are some of the constraints yet, the big challenges that need to be overcome, or things that are holding you back
right.
from really moving as fast as you'd like to?
Well, I agree with my colleagues on the panel here. I think, you know, from a technology perspective, I don't see technology as a constraining factor. You know, at the EPA, we spent the last several years looking at our IT infrastructure, getting prepared for the mobile workforce. So we have implemented a new network supporting more capability. We've improved our virtual private network, our access, our VPNs. We are positioning the workforce to be able to work securely from anywhere. I would still think that the largest barrier is the cultural barrier. You know,
yeah.
You know, people are used to managing employees where they sit. They can walk down the hall, they can see them. Not that I've walk down the hall too much and look for my employees. You know, I think it's the mind shift that needs to change. And it goes back to performance management, you know, and I think you talked about it earlier. You know, what's the most important thing? That they're actually producing the work that
right.
they're being measured on. And I think that's the largest area that we need to look at. Certainly within the EPA, like DISA, you know, we are going through a training, not just for supervisors, but for employees on telework. You know, what does this mean? What does it mean for a supervisor, and what does it mean for employees? So we're moving out in those directions, and it's a big priority for the agency. It's a big priority for the government, is to increase mobility.
Sure.
You know, for so many reasons.
Sure. And you brought up training again. We've heard training over and over again. I think that is something that, you know, you can't just put it out there and it works. You got to make sure you have the disciplines in place. Nik Rouda, how about over at Riverbed? What are some of the issues, other than the government continuing resolution and things like that get in the way sometimes, but what are some of the constraints that you see to get where you want to go?
I think performance management really is the key issue, but I'm going to turn that slightly on its head and say the performance isn't just the commitment and motivation of the individuals. I know there's a lot of great workers out there in government who put them in any location and they'll get the job done. I think it's important that from an IT perspective that the various government organizations and departments are able to deliver the same experience for them wherever they happen to be working. I'll take a couple examples. Riverbed has dozens of customers in government, but one thing they all have in common is they do have employees in a wide variety of locations, and they need to deliver the same level of service to these people, so being able to manage that performance. One example is the PTO, where they are heavily involved in working with industry, working with technology in a variety of locations, and whether they need to get to courtrooms or they need to interview business leaders, whatever aspect of their job, wherever it takes them, it's very important that they can not be delayed by any of the systems or IT infrastructure that's supporting them. They can't say, oh, I'll do that when I get back to the office. They need to be productive in those locations. So again, I think being able to deliver a consistent level of service to employees wherever they live is very, very important. And Riverbed's helped, again, dozens of government organizations, civilian, military, even intelligence with these types of solutions.
Yeah, I think that's important. That's the last thing you want is to go to a program and things don't work right or things are slow, and then everybody sours on the program right out of the box, and then you run into all kinds of difficulties. So I think you're right. Between the training we've heard from the panelists and making sure you get the infrastructure correct for the program is so important. Paul Cantwell-Lifesize, what are some of the constraints you see, Paul, that still need to be overcome? What are the things that are holding back these programs from moving as rapidly as we'd like to see them move?
Well, Jim, one of the really exciting things about, looking at the federal government as a customer or consumer of technology products, they're probably the most technologically savvy customer on the planet. They absolutely get technology, and they're a huge consumer of technology, probably the largest consumer in the world of technology products. And I think the thing that industry really needs to understand is we've got to make these products incredibly easy to use, because they know these productivity tools that industry provides can actually make them do a better job delivering their solutions. And one of the things that absolutely drives a lot of government customers crazy is you walk by these very expensive telepresence rooms and the lights are turned off. It's like, well, the reason why is these things are really difficult to use. And I think the challenge to industry's got to be, hey, if we build these tools, they got to be easy to use, easy to deploy, and easy to maintain. And I think we also need to provide products to the government that don't massively consume these network capacity. I think that we've got to provide those network tools and solutions to the government that are much more bandwidth efficient. And we're hands down, Lifesize is hands down the most bandwidth efficient video conferencing company out there right now.
Well, the interesting thing too, I like your point of view of the customer and ease of use and so forth. Recall some of my days running Secret Service IT, and I remember showing some of the agents some of the really cool tools and devices we had and whatever. And I remember so vividly one of the agents who protected the president looking at me saying, "Jim, people are going to be shooting at me, and you want me to be looking around trying to find these buttons? I want to hit a button, and I want everything there that I need. That's Absolutely. Your job. Make it all work by me pushing one button." And I took that to heart in terms of thinking through what the customer perspective is here. Let's switch to the future. We're running into our final segment of the program. We got, I believe, just under 12 minutes here. Let's talk about where this is all going in the future. I know one thing, I think Sharon brought up the generations. I know when the generations of kids that are out there today with the texting and the messaging and the social networking sites, I know when they enter the workforce, their expectations are going to be quite different than the ones that we had when we entered the workforce. So let's talk about the vision for the future. What do you see as all this going? What's it going to look like out there in the future workplace? Let's start with Bryan Pagliano at the State Department. Bryan, what's your crystal ball say it all looks like out in the future of what the world will be like?
So, Secretary Clinton back in December held a town hall announcing the release of the first QDDR at State Department. Part of that was the concept of 21st century statecraft, which essentially is using the modern tools that the internet technology presents us to be able to better our diplomacy efforts. A big part of that is mobile. A big part of that is remote access. You see all these tools that new people to the workforce, young people to the workforce are coming in, and it's old hat to them. So, the future is going to be trying to pair that flexibility that they're used to in the social networks, as well as the enterprise data delivery to essentially a device agnostic environment. And what you'll see is, the individual choosing from a menu of options on what they want to do to fit their technology profile, right. And essentially work anytime, right. anywhere that they happen to sort of be most productive.
Personalized computing, yeah. Very good, thanks, Bryan. Nik Rouda, how about your vision of the future? Where's this all going from Riverbed's perspective? How do you see this stuff all playing out over the next, say, 5 years or so?
Freedom.
Freedom. Okay.
It's all about let freedom ring. Let IT be deployed where IT is most efficient. Let people put the applications where they want to host the applications, put the data in the data centers they want, consolidate data centers, realign bases if they need to, put the people where they want to be, put everything in the right place for it. Make sure it's fast, make sure it's secure, but otherwise deploy things optimally for the best efficiency. And I think Riverbed's really going to help usher in a lot of this freedom, again, just by overcoming any concerns around distance, overcoming any concerns around performance, just helping government deploy itself the way that makes the most sense to get the job done.
Yeah, great. I like that freedom. There's been so much talk about transparency, and I guess you could talk about transparency and freedom becoming sort of intertwined as we move along into the future. Vaughn Noga-EPA, as the CTO, I guess you're challenged to always be thinking of future and what's next and so forth. And what do you see as the future from your perspective?
Right, I think you're going to start hearing a lot of dittos as we go down the line here. But certainly, the technologies aside, in the future we see a worker working anywhere, working anywhere like they work at work, seamless access to information, and doing away with a lot of the issues, technology issues that they're faced now. I would say if you look at EPA, we've got a segment of the population, the IT folks, who don't have a problem with the technologies. They get in just fine. You ask them about it, it works just fine for them. You pull another segment of the population, and it doesn't meet their needs.
Right.
They can't make it work. So those are issues that we need to resolve, and we identify also issues with training. If you're going to train a population, train it one way to use something, and it doesn't matter where they are, they're going to take that with them to that next location. So we've identified that as an area where we only want to train you once. I mean, I've had people tell me, well, we can just provide them training on how to use this token. And at that point where you need to provide training, they are in the mode of using it.
Right.
They're not in the mode of being trained on it to use it. So
Right.
we really need to focus on training efforts as we go forward. And really, it's the future is making it ubiquitous, making it easy to get to, and making it work.
Yeah. Good point. Very good. Well said, Vaughn. Thanks. Paul, Cantwell-Lifesize, what's your future look like? What's that crystal ball look like in terms of where this is all going?
I mean, my crystal ball is absolutely the proliferation of video throughout the entire enterprise. Make it so easy to use, so bandwidth efficient, that it's going to be as easy to use as making a telephone call. And it's such a powerful collaborative tool and allows teleworkers to stay connected throughout the enterprise, wherever they are in the world. And I think that, you still have to comply with things like, efficient bandwidth utilization, make sure they're standards-based and they're secure, and that whole ease of use, I think, will encourage the use of video throughout the enterprise.
Terrific. Yeah, I'm looking for when my avatar can become like 3D and a hologram, and I can show up wherever I want to show up, and people, yeah, hey, how you doing, Jim? Hey, how's it going? Yeah. And Jack, what's it look like in the future from DISA, Jack Penkoske?
Well, in the past when I gave talks to audiences on telework, I used to say, I hope you do not embrace telework. And then I go on to say, because then that means more people will be coming to DISA. But one time the quote got into the paper without the second part, and so I stopped using that quote anymore.
Yeah. That's probably like this radio show. You don't have anybody writing a new headlines and changing the tone.
Yeah, so I want to see the script later. But my vision for the future is that we eliminate the word teleworker. And that
Very good.
we just start talking about the worker, and that we're not worried about setting up perhaps artificial goals or numbers and things like that, but that we just focus on the worker with the biggest eye on performance and providing the service. And if we do that and have the tools for the individuals, so and the tools are secure, then we don't have to worry about that. Even talking about where people are working. So eliminate the word teleworker. That's my vision for the future, and we need to do that if we want to continue to attract the best and brightest for the future.
I like that a lot, Jack. I'm going to steal that, by the way, that line, and use it from time to time. Eliminate the word telework and make it work. Sharon Wall-GSA. Sharon, you've been involved in this now for a while. What's your future? Where's this all going?
Well, building off of what Jack said, work is what you do, it's not where you are. And so I think that we're going to enable a much more agile, mobile, flexible workforce that is innovative, that we create the transparency that the American people are looking for by creating a much more participative government that is able to work irregardless of natural disaster, man-made disaster, by providing them the tools that we know are available and just putting them in the hands. One of the things that folks talked about was the training aspect of it. You know, we can't continue to serve up training, so we're creating virtual tools where you go and get a 3-minute vignette on how to on our website. And so consequently, that it's just-in-time training. What do you need? It doesn't need to be as focused and prescriptive, but just on the same notion of, you know, just brief training videos to essentially refresh people. The collaborative open platforms that young people are used to working with, we're going to have those where people build on ideas. You put an idea out there, and the next thing you know, you've got people building off of it. That's kind of what we created in our telework forum, our intranet, so that people were putting up issues that they were experiencing, and the whole institutional organization was responding and answering their questions. So tapping in to the knowledge of the organization and being able to leverage that to the benefit of all.
Yeah, that's another one we never thought about, just the knowledge sharing capability that comes about and the ability to everybody to, you know, be part of issues that in the past they've not been part of. Well, this show's been great. Let me try to do a little bit some summaries here as to some of the key points that I heard. First of all, I like the idea of breaking it up into social, economic, and environmental issues. And if you think about it, that's a great way to sort of categorize what telework's all about. It's got social benefits and recruitment and retention benefits, and as well as economic and environmental benefits. We also talked about the fact that two things are happening. We've got generational changes happening, and expectations to the workforce becoming significantly different into the future. And we're approaching a world where time will begin to equal zero, and the bandwidth will be there and is slowly getting there, and will be ubiquitous to where we can be working just about any time, anywhere, which is challenging us to come up with these creative and innovative ways to do things. There still are some constraints. We still have some culture issues out there. We still have some technology upgrades. You got to get it right. What we've driven home pretty hard here is the importance of training and customer feedback, that we want to make sure if we do it, it's done right. And I like the idea of telework for the mind, body, and soul. I thought that was an interesting way to view it, as well as a freedom generator. It's going to be freedom to do a lot of things in a lot of ways. So with that, I want to turn and thank, first of all, our panelists thank you for a couple things. One, for doing the great work you're doing. Based on what we heard here today, you're all making some tremendous progress, and we're all real proud of that. And thanks for taking time from your busy schedules to come down here and share these stories. I know you're all very, very busy individuals, so the time's appreciative.